All right, you're listening to the Brown Perspective, and today we're going to be talking about the Texas freeze. Growing up in the Northeast, I know how cold get, and I can imagine being in that type of situation without electricity or without a source of heating or water. It was just a disaster. That it was, and I think we are hoping a lot of this stuff was going to be done in 2020, but here we are in 2021.
And that's the other thing too, that it's not just Texas. I
Hmm.
have a coworker that lives in North Carolina, and we were on the phone yesterday, and he was telling me that they kept losing their electricity, losing internet access, and that it was cold outside, and definitely affecting them over there as well. And I, I remember telling him, I'm staring out my window, and I see a blue sky and two trees that are motionless. There's no wind, sunny, and one of the privileges of living in sunny LA is that during this time of year when everyone else is suffering with the snow, we get cold weather, but I mean that's the worst of it.
Yes, and also let's not forget that, California went through its issues with the
I
electricity
was
and rolling out
yeah.
outbreaks, not outbreaks,
Yeah, I was
outages.
yeah, I was gonna say ya vas a empezar Debbie Downer.
Debbie Downer. No,
I'm
put it
putting
in
up
perspective because in some ways, I know that some of the same Texas politician, Ted Cruz,
yeah.
were, talking smack about, the liberal policies here in California, and that, we can manage our fires, we
Hmm.
can manage our electricity, and long and behold, here we have an incident that cripples pretty much the entire state's grid, except for El Paso, because El Paso is actually one of the only major cities in Texas that's connected to the western
Hmm.
part of the grid. But we just have to talk about our boy Ted Cruz, man.
Yeah,
Why was he trying to go to Mexico?
yeah, and here's this meme right here of all the places that he goes to Mexico, and of course he goes to Mexico because it's easy, it's convenient, racks up some more frequent flyer miles, and it's an easy escape for the wealthy, for the privileged.
Hmm.
And there's a video going around where they caught him at the airport, and here's some pictures of that. And they asked him, and you said earlier he's trying to blame his daughters. He's trying to pin it on his daughters now.
Yeah, he's trying to basically say that he only went down to make sure that his daughters could get there, and then he was planning to come right back, which doesn't make sense because look at the big bag that he's carrying.
Yeah,
So obviously he had plans to stay there for a few days, and and I think politicians are people and they have families, and I understand that they probably were wanting to spend some time as a family, but when you're a senator, when you're an elected official, you are expected to provide leadership and to help people out. And I know the juxtaposition of Ted Cruz was Beto O'Rourke, who was out there helping people and helping organize relief, mutual aid, going to people who have been impacted by the Texas freeze.
yeah. Well, it's possible that he felt that he just wasn't going to take any damage, political damage, because of this. After all, he knew that his friends at Fox were going to just do diversion tactics and try to blame this on the liberals or the progressives or right AOC, because we know that's what they're doing.
Well, that's what they did, which is
Yeah.
unbelievable. It's just like how do you go from, this is a problem that's happening now, and yes, there were some wind turbines that froze, but the reality is that they only represent about 12% of the Texas energy supply. But then there were natural gas generating um, power plants that did not work, in part because Texas and how proud they are of deregulation.
Yep.
They had not regulated their industry, the electric industry, and one of the reasons they're not connected to the national grid is because they didn't want to have to deal with federal regulations on that.
Yeah, and there was a report that said that had they been under those regulations, that some of this disaster could have been averted. Now, I'm
Hmm.
not saying I'm saying some of it because in reality, I don't think even the cars in Texas are not the roads and people are not prepared for these types of storms. So because they just don't expect to get them like this. So to some sense, there's only so much preparation that could have gone in, but
Hmm.
terribly just being ill prepared. That's just something that private industry is not going to account for, because they're gonna say, well, what's the risk that we have to deal with this type of situation? Oh, it's gonna be expensive, so let's not account for it. Let's not take care of it. And this is the this is the thing with the libertarian mindset, that and those free market proponents of the free market capitalism, that they say, well, the free market, it corrects itself, right? So incidents like this are not supposed to happen. But what they never tell you is, okay, sure, it corrects itself, but in what time frame, right? They always, every time they talk about free market capitalism and letting the private sector go in and do these things, they always talk about like an idealized small community of like 1,000 people, where
Hmm.
if you're a butcher or if you're running some private business, and you screw up, or your meat is tainted, or you're doing something that's illegal, you're gonna get exposed right away. And the people in the town, they all know you, so you're gonna be a target. They won't go to your business, so it's gonna be a few days that you'll be able to just stay in business. You won't survive. But we're talking about cities here with millions of people, and these corporations, they do stuff, and then the consequences are felt for years, and it could be years or decades before they even feel any of the repercussions of their actions. And so, yeah, the free market will fix itself in this case. How many people are going to die, right? How
Hmm.
many deaths that could have been avoided? And well, maybe it won't fix itself, but let's just go along with let's make, for argument's sake, let's say that it will fix itself, that the free market will fix itself after what, years of this? After how many more people will die? They never tell you the human cost of this free market thinking. They always want to make it seem like the free market fixes itself. Nobody ever asks, how long is that going to take?
Yeah, and the human suffering. And
Yeah.
the other thing to point out is that it's not so much that the problem is going to fix itself, and that the companies are going to pay for these investments and improvements. No, those costs are going to be shifted to the consumers, and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
the consumers who are going to face higher utility rates. And oftentimes, and I know that has been an issue here in California, where the state has built out the industry. The companies have raised their rates, but that money hasn't gone to improve the system and make it better, and make it so that if there is an emergency, or when the Santa Ana winds come up, or when the wildfires happen, that the infrastructure is more resilient. No, that money has gone to their investors. So I think that's the other issue that we need to point out, that not only do the customers pay with the human suffering, but they also pay with their financial, with their pockets, right? They're the
Yep.
ones that bankroll a lot of the improvements that should be covered by either the companies or government.
Yeah. And I'm looking for pictures here. I know you sent me a link in Instagram to Mexicans having fun in this storm.
Oh yeah, La Raza. I think that's
Yeah.
the other interesting part, or not the interesting, the other part of the story that made it a little bit more lighthearted in terms of how people were um, adjusting to life without electricity. I know that I saw a video of this Mexican family eating, and as soon as the light came back on, everybody just running to charge their phones, right?
Yeah.
So it was just running to charge their phones. There was people taking pictures in the snow. But obviously, you also see the people who are here, waiting in line, trying to get water, trying to get supplies, because again, it wasn't unlike unlike a well, I guess you can make the argument that they did have a few days to prepare, but obviously not to the extent that other parts of the country are prepared for cold weather.
Yeah. It could be a scary situation if your water pipes are freezing. So
Oh yeah.
there's no water at all. There's no electricity. I mean, most Americans are ill prepared for those type of situations. I would
Yeah, and
think.
that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like, as a New Englander, you kind of, or a place, someone who goes up in the cold weather, you know that okay, you need to take care of the pipes, leave them slightly open so they don't burst, so they don't freeze. There's certain things that you learn by living in that environment, even if it's just a few months. And there's other things that that like you said, that they don't prepare you. You haven't experienced that, so you don't know how to prepare. So I feel really bad for those people whose pipes are bursting, who and the water damage and all those things. So it's terrible. I mean, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of anger after this. So we'll see if what turns Texas blue is actually this the aftermath of this Texas freeze.
You know how the movie sequels are never really as good as the original, but this COVID sequel in 2021 is proving to be a lot in a facetious. I'm saying this in a facetious way. It's proving to be
Hmm.
a lot more intense than 2020 with
No
everything that's
kidding. Yeah.
yeah with everything that's going on. But in addition to just the financial impact that this is going to have on people, this could be life or death for some people because
Hmm.
so no electricity, no hot water. Now you're in a situation where you also could be snowed in. So if you can't charge your cell phone, if you don't have a landline, then all you have is really your neighbors if you need something, but they're probably going through the same thing as you are. So
Hmm.
if you maybe you have a reserve, a food reserve, but if you don't, then yeah, it could get bleak pretty fast. And so there have been some casualties because of this. I know there's well, at least the one that I heard about is the one where they left the car on in the garage because they wanted to use that to generate some heat.
Mm.
But then there was the carbon monoxide poisoning.
Mm.
So yeah, that's terrible. I think it was an elderly woman and a small girl. So yeah, that's just not good. It's just, but a lot of people don't know that you can't do that. They just we're just ill prepared for these type of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the survival instinct kicks in and people want to stay warm, and and I know that also includes, having an open, if you don't have a chimney, if you have anything inside the house, you got to make sure it's ventilated. But obviously, in this case, if it's ventilated, it's going to get colder. So yeah, so it's such a catastrophe. And again, it does impact the elderly the most. It impacts young people, children,
Mm-hmm.
babies. I'm sure that there were a lot of babies and small children who have been impacted by what just transpired. So I think people in Texas, leaders, political leaders, business leaders in Texas need to be held accountable for what transpired this week and the fact that
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't just one day, right? And they were supposed to be rolling blackouts,
Yep.
but they weren't really rolling, right? And it appeared that some affluent communities were able to keep their power on, while other communities didn't.
Yeah.
So
There's that picture
obviously,
of
the
Houston.
inequalities.
The picture that shows that downtown. It's like the outside of downtown, like 20-30 minutes. It's all black, and then the downtown, it's all lit up. I
Hmm.
think is it this one here? Well, anyway, let's hope that they all have puffy jackets like the one that you had when we were in college to
Yeah,
keep them
it makes
warm.
a difference. You got to layer up.
I tell you that some people are just ill prepared for these things because I know when I went to college in the East Coast, coming from LA, I think that was terribly just this is terrible preparation on my part. No, just I think my thickest jacket was so thin it was a joke. So I usually ended up layering up. And even when I lived in New York, I have a short term memory for cold weather. So I remember I used to stand on the platform waiting for the subway to come, and then so I'd be really cold outside, like my cheeks freezing, the tip of your nose feels cold, my hands freezing, and then I'd get into the subway cart, and then get into work, and I'd forget about it. And then the next day is the same thing again. It's like, oh fuck, I should wear some gloves. I should get a beanie. I would, yeah, just I have a short
The
term
right
memory
type
when it
of
comes to bad weather.
shoes, warm shoes, because that's having your feet warm is everything in cold weather.
Yeah, so again, yeah, this terrible. Hopefully that this doesn't last more longer for them, and they can get their power back, get their heating back, get some running water, and most importantly, I hope that the voters express themselves in the ballot box, and they try to go for leaders that will actually try to help them out and not leave them out to dry, like that mayor from Colorado City. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, they was he was telling them that basically to now to fend for themselves, that
Yeah,
government was not going to save you.
yeah. Which he's trying to appeal to that type of, again, the libertarian, the conservative crowd. Pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, and the government's not there to help you. It's just those type of arguments make absolutely no sense, right? Do these people not want firefighters? Do they not want a police force? Do they not want anything that the government provides, right? But he's saying, but he went further than that. He said, "This is survival of the fittest. The strong will survive, and the weak will perish."
Yeah, I don't think he wanted to be mayor. He didn't like being mayor that much
You know?
because why
Yeah.
was he? What was he saying those things?
Yeah, two things. He either was tired of being a mayor and he just said, "I'm gonna go out with a bang," or he's trying to do a poor, incredibly poor imitation of Trump and the type of rhetoric that you would hear from Trump. That type of tough guy attitude, that talk back to reporters, that fake news, all of that the way that Trump handles just about anything. And no matter what he says, it just rips off his back. Well, apparently that only works for Trump. It doesn't work for these type of mayors because he already resigned. He's gone.
Yeah, and it's interesting. What I find mind-boggling, going back to that that the governor and so many others on Fox News and other outlets are trying to blame green energy and AOC, right? And it's
Well,
amazing
yeah.
their ability to try to, turn this disaster into a political win, right? So I guess trying to use this crisis as a way to score political points, but I think that
It's
the people
yeah.
of Texas are smarter than that.
Yeah, it's just a diversion tactic. They're just trying to deflect. So they don't want to focus on the real cause of this. So it's a stretch because what they were saying was, "Oh, imagine if AOC, if the likes of AOC were actually in power and running policies like the Green New Deal, this would have been 10 times worse." It's like, dude, shut the fuck up, man. Like, it's just, and as you said, I hope that the people of Texas see through this BS. They're just trying to deflect and not talk about the real problems, and also using the example of the wind turbines and saying, "Oh, well, look at these wind turbines, they froze, so that's the reason," when they only account for 12%. So they're not necessarily lying, but they're being dishonest because they're omitting a lot of information, and they're just telling you selectively what they want you to hear so that they can persuade you to say, "Yeah, see, it's these progressives, these like green energy advocates that are at fault here." Unfortunately, it works on a lot of people, but I hope more and more people start to realize that that's just all BS, and it's just a way to deflect.
I think they will because you know what? Nobody mixes with Texas.
All right, so let's wrap it up. Thanks to you all out there for listening. If you like our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. We're on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Nos vemos.
Ciao.